Thanks everyone for attending the monthly Events Roundtable by Renewed. This roundtable is to discuss challenges and opportunities for events and business professionals. It is slated to be interactive, moderated by myself, but I certainly won't talk the whole time. I did reach out beforehand to see if anyone had specific questions or topics they wanted to discuss. So I've got a couple of those here on my screen, but certainly there is a chat function at the bottom of the Zoom, and you can certainly go ahead and ask your questions in the chat function. I'll try to keep track of those while we are talking. So the first thing I thought I'd kind of just put out there, and again, it's pretty general, but I'd love to hear from some of you that have already had some events. You know, what are people anticipating doing for some of your fall events? I can say that from our company, we are moving forward with our fall events. In some cases, we are offering an on-demand version after the fact for people who aren't able to attend in person for travel restrictions or other reasons. In other very small limited cases, we're offering a live stream at the same time as a live event, but in most cases, we're trying to just have our live event and then have an on-demand after the fact so that we don't add a lot of extra costs, but also we don't want to diminish you know, the user experience for the folks that are there. So that's just what our company's doing. But if anybody else wants to kind of jump in, and Tish, I think this was one of your questions, you know, just sort of what the anticipation is for the fall events. Are people requiring vaccine requirements, masking? Are you having them? Are you not having them? Are you doing hybrid? Just kind of put it out there to folks.
Yeah, I was super interested to see what people are doing, because we're getting some pushback for red. I mean, our reg is really slow right now because I think people are waiting to see, and they're like, well, are we going to get, can we get our money back at one point? Are you going to do a virtual if it closes? And I did see one of our industry events sent out a press release that basically said, look, we're planning to go live. Worst case scenario for them is that we would require masks. And I thought that was a good option, because they're not saying we're not going to give you your money back. They're still going to be like, unless, you know, things really do shut down. But ours is beginning of November. So I'm just curious if you're giving money back, if you're offering any sort of discounts or, yeah.
Folks want to jump in on that?
I'm happy to share what we've done and what we're doing. So
Great.
For the meeting that I just had, it was a meeting of a membership group. So people pay to be members of the group, and then the fee to attend the meeting is more nominal. We did decide to require vaccination and masks. We were in DC, and the mayor took care of that for us by requiring a mask mandate. So, but I did chase down every person for that vaccination proof in advance. We did lose a handful of people because they weren't vaccinated.
Stephanie, how did you chase them down? Did you have an app that you used? I know somebody posted in Guild yesterday, they were looking at apps to do that. Or did you simply say to people, send me a copy of it, and then you would destroy it? Or what did you decide?
Yeah, in this case, again, the membership group, and it was a reasonably small meeting. And so I could sort of do one-to-one. I said, you know, bring proof with you, but you could send it to me in advance if you wanted. And in the end, I really chased down everybody because I did not want to turn anybody away at the door, because that would have been awful. So that's what we did. It worked. It worked out. And the people who were here appreciated that we had done that. The other thing, what we did do, however, I was very much against providing a live stream of the meeting, in large part because our meetings are so discussion based, and it's a horrible experience. You can't watch people having a discussion. But in the end, because of the circumstances, and because I was going to lose a lot of money from we didn't meet the guarantee, which was already lower. You know, I thought we would make it, but we didn't. So it did add cost, but I charged the same amount for people to attend virtually as I did in person, which in the past, of course, I wouldn't have done that. And people paid, they were happy to pay, and it worked out. And we did have to really pay a lot of attention to making the experience good, both in the room and virtually, and it worked out. Again, I wouldn't want to do that for a big event, but it worked out because of what it was. So our next meeting of the same group is in November, and we're planning, and now the venue also just changed its policy yesterday. They are now requiring proof of vaccination, and they require it during the check-in process live, which I'm really concerned about because, you know, if somebody forgets and they've traveled here, that's awful. But we'll work with it. So we're going to require masks, we're going to require vaccination, and I will offer the virtual again option, and, you know, we'll charge for it. And so we'll handle it that way. I have another meeting I have a conference in December, which is a much bigger, not a huge trade show, but a conference where I would anticipate 400 people, 300 to 500 people, something like that. And last year we did it entirely virtually, of course. We had 600 people. So this year we had planned to do it a hybrid, but not at the same time. We're doing it in person in Scottsdale in 1 week, and then a week later we're doing it virtually. So it's really a virtual event and an online event. It is not a live stream of, you know, it is designed specifically to be, because also you can't start at 8 a.m. Virtually, because for some people it may be 5 o'clock in the morning, or, you know, or 10 o'clock at night. So that's how we're treating that. I haven't made a decision yet about vaccination, masks or whatnot, but I can't imagine not requiring vaccines at this moment. I think that's probably how we will go, because that's how so many things are going. And I'm not sure what to say about masks. I would think we should require it, but we haven't yet. So that's where we are. And so far registration is actually going fine for the in-person version. And I don't know if I would call it slow it's actually fine for the virtual. People don't need to register that far in advance for that. So.
Great. Anyone else have plans for the fall events that they want to share, that they're thinking of in terms of either operations that you're changing up, vaccination requirements, or just registration, how things are working?
I actually had a question for Stephanie, if that would be okay.
Yeah, of course.
Stephanie, how are you managing the communications in advance of the shows, especially for the ones that you are requiring proof of vaccination for? Just curious about how you're managing that. And then also for the show where you're offering the on-demand after the one in December, the bigger show, where it's after the live event, are you charging the same amount for the on-demand, or are you charging a smaller amount?
Sure. So I'll take the second one first. So just to be clear, it's not on demand. It's actually a live event held virtually. So it's current, live, just not in person. We're not charging the same amount because we had already planned to do it that way. We just feel like it's a way to maximize attendance. And so our ticket price is about an average of $1,200 for the live, and it's an average of $400 for the virtual. Sorry, $1,200 for in person, $400 for virtual, with associated early birds and whatnot, but that's an average price. For the meeting, the membership meeting, I only charge a few $100s to begin with. It just basically defrays the cost because people are paying, companies pay like $8,000 or $10,000 or so to be a member of the group on an annual basis. And so the membership, the meeting fee is really just sort of costs. It's not meant to make a profit. But because of the significant cost of adding the live stream, I did charge people the same amount, and that was about $325 for in-person or virtual for that membership thing. Did you ask an additional, oh, how am I managing communication? Well, for the membership group, again, it's a reasonably small group. We were talking, typically we would have 75 to 90 people at a membership meeting in person. So that's a manageable number. And I just manage that by email and spreadsheets. For the December event, I haven't determined that yet. And I think, Jennifer, you asked as well, am I using an app or how am I capturing the proof? I don't know yet. I haven't figured that
out. Actually, someone also asked Stephanie what platform you're using for your virtual.
For our virtual events, we've been using a platform called Engages, ENGA, Engages, GEZ with a Z on the end, engages.com. I'd be happy to talk to anybody about it. I like it very much. I have looked at all kinds of platforms and I have found some, they all have an area where they're really good at. And then the others, like nobody is really awesome at everything, at least not for a reasonable price. And sometimes even for a very expensive price. So I like that platform.
Okay. And then another question, is the virtual event the same content and speakers as the live? So are you essentially saying to all the speakers, hey, we want you to come back next week and do the whole thing again virtually?
Yes, that's part of the speaker requirement, is that they deliver, but they will, so speakers get half price to attend the in-person event. They're registered for free for the virtual event, and they're required to participate, at least in their own session. And the agenda is the same, of course, time shifted, and there are a few things, of course, that are a little bit different, like an evening activity. Of course, there's no dinner, and we're doing some virtual things. They're a little bit different.
Great. Let's see. Doesn't look like any other questions on the chat.
Can I ask something about what Stephanie had mentioned? So Stephanie had mentioned that no platform that she's looked at is strong in all areas. And I was looking at I don't know, I got an email, and some of you probably got it as well, from, I can't remember who, saying, we do virtual event networking right. And I think one of the biggest problems I've had after having produced several events in the past 6 months is multi-day events online, is that the networking piece just never rings. Like, we can make this really good for internal departments with content, but we can pre-record sessions. We can even do live sessions or live Q&A and semi-live. But ultimately, that networking piece for the attendee has gotten lost. Do you believe that Engages.com provided you some sort of networking that you were happy with? And if not, did you use something else? Did you use an API to make something work?
Yeah,
that you could share?
Well, Engages, so no, not necessarily. What Engages has added in a pretty nice way is their one-to-one video calls, and also small group, embedded small group discussion. So it can be like a Zoom, but embedded in their platform, which most don't do. You can use Zoom or another platform, and then it sort of takes you out to, right. Some are more elegant than others, but anyway, I don't consider that awesome networking. I will say, we found for our last event something that was pretty cool, and it's I think it's called Meetaway. And it's there's no API, it doesn't integrate. It's sort of a pain in that you had to register separately. So we had sort of had to manage that. But it's a networking roulette where you register for it and you put in some criteria, and then the system matches you up. And, so it's sort of like the experience, which I hate, of where you sit in chairs at a live event and you move from chair to chair and it's crazy and it's very loud and you get 60 seconds to talk to the other. I hate that. But this is sort of a better version of that, in that you can set the time. In this case, it was 5 minutes, and it will, well, hello, oh, hi, I'm talking to you for 5 minutes. And then, whoop, next 5 minutes, oh, hey, Jamie, and oh, hey, Tom, and it sort of moves you along, and you can extend the time, you can meet another person. It actually handles it really nicely. That's the thing that I've seen work the best. I've also tried a thing called Meebo, which is kind of cool, but we didn't get a lot of people.
That's the animated one. That's the one that's kind of animated, and you move forward and backward with your arrow keys, I think.
Yes, yeah. It's kind of like an old-fashioned video game, but it's
like an old-fashioned video.
Yeah, but it's cool because more than one person can talk at a time in the environment, and it's a little more like a cocktail party. But getting people to go there was a little bit of a challenge, but people who went and sort of figured it out liked it. So that's what I would say.
Great. So we did have, I'm going to go to Tom in just a second, but before I move to him to share his experience, there was a question if people are requiring a different mix for, vaccinations for some, but not attendees. I can say for us, we're doing it on a case-by-case basis. Our employees have been told everyone must either have a vaccination or a negative COVID test before they're on site, and they have to wear masks the entire time. For attendees and speakers, we are following whatever the CDC recommended or required guidelines are. So that's just our company to date. That may change as other things change. Once the FDA gives full approval of vaccine, that might make folks change. But that's what we're doing. But Tom, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, can everyone hear me okay? Great. Thanks, great to see everybody. So we are hosting our 12th annual summit on October 4th, 6th through 8th. And I'll just give you a high level of what we're planning to do. This is our fourth run at the rodeo here. We've done this is our fourth virtual event. So we're doing 5 elements. The event itself is going to be virtual. So 3 days, half days of the event. And then there are going to be 4 in-person components. We're going to pre-record the entire thing in mid-September and basically take out 4 rooms, conference rooms, and turn them into film studios. Then we're going to have 3 receptions that will be all in person as well, if all goes as planned and if Delta variant doesn't close us all down. But so far, so good. So it'll be 4 in-person components, 1 virtual event. The vaccination issue, I've got language right now that I'm sharing with my attorney to basically all the liability language. Basically, it's a version that I borrowed with permission from another group, and it'll require an opt-in for people to follow a certain number of policies related to COVID. And right now, I'm favoring a mandatory vaccination, and there's some elements about that. We use Hopin as a platform. We're dispensing all together with virtual booths. Just haven't found them to be successful. Don't know what others' experience has been, but and we're trying to emphasize the in-person networking versus the virtual. Interested, Stephanie, and found it interesting what you've done virtually, and we'll certainly check out those platforms. So that's kind of in essence what we're doing, and we're learning. It's all a journey, but the main thing I guess I'd share with the group is the reason we're doing in-person pre-records is to try to increase the engagement among the participants. So it's not it's more of a, I just think, a higher production value for the final result, because we'll put lower thirds and have a professional editing crew, make it look really good for the final. So that's kind of what we're attempting, and we'll have lessons learned, I'm sure, to share after the fact. So happy to answer any questions y'all might have.
Can I ask if you meant that you were going to be having you're going to set up each of the 3 conference rooms at some sort of a hotel type place. You're going to use your AV to record it like live stream, except you're going to have a higher level of recording. So it won't be just a camera in the back of the room, but you'll bring in like a professional camera crew to shoot this experience.
Correct.
And then you'll have audience that's live, which is a paid attendee.
No, the audience,
and they'll be attending the receptions.
There'll be no audience.
No audience. Okay.
In the virtual event itself. So
I meant live. I meant when you're shooting in September, those will be attendees who are attending your receptions. They'll also come in for a content session that you'll shoot. Did I understand you wrong?
Yeah, no, so the pre-records will only be speakers. So those are going to be very small groups. The pre-records will only be speakers. So it's like, basketball with only the players.
Yeah,
no audience.
Gotcha. And then the piece where it'll be the receptions that you mentioned 3 receptions. How will those work?
So those will
be September or October?
Those will be October. They'll be smaller. Mask will be mandatory. Vaccination proof will be mandatory. Social distancing will be, and they'll be smaller than a typical reception will be. So that's the aim. Yeah. And
when you say smaller, what's typical and what's small? Like, is typical like a 500-person conference reception or a 10,000-person conference reception?
So this would be, so one will be outdoors, covered but outdoors. Another will be a room that would typically hold 275. Will now go to max will probably be about 125. Yeah. So it's about half. We're expecting about half the capacity will be allowable at the time of the event. Yeah. And
you're telling people, by the way, it'll be half capacity, so be sure to get there on time, sort of thing.
Well, it's all invitation only. So making and we're informing everyone that the capacity will be lower due to restrictions. Yeah. So there have been some comments on the chat. What were the comments about the vaccination police and various things?
I think it was just regular comments, Tom. There weren't any questions. It was just folks talking about they didn't want to have to be the ones to say, please put your mask on and set. But hopefully in some cases you can get the hotel to help with that. I found at our event, we had about 350 people a couple weeks ago at our event, and 80% of them were masked. It wasn't required. It was highly recommended. The staff all had it on. We actually have people come back to our tables and say, oh gosh, I wasn't going to wear a mask, but everyone's got one. So can I have one of yours? So,
right.
But it's definitely, it's not optimal. I will say though, people have been testing positive even after being fully vaccinated. And that did happen at our event that we had live as well. We had a few people let us know after the fact that they were in fact positive and they had been fully vaccinated. So I think it's important if you can get them to wear masks as much as possible. And to your point, having it be broken out more, you got to think really hard about receptions and food and all that. It's not optimal. People are going to get all kinds of sicknesses, right, going forward, the flu, the COVID, whatever. I don't think you're ever going to have a zero case, but the biggest thing is to try to keep it minimal.
How many people did you have for your reception where the found person tested positive? Or
Oh, I don't know who. I mean, we had about 350 people at our event, and I want to say 4 total we heard from, which is under 1%, which is about what you would expect for, and normal,
were you
except
hybrid,
for the
Jennifer?
fact that they were vaccinated. So
Were you
Right.
hybrid for that event?
no.
It was purely on-site only.
could I
Yeah,
ask?
because
What
costs
city
get
was
tricky,
that
right?
event?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting.
what was the procedure after that to let folks know in the
We
event?
sent an email out to people to let them know that somebody tested positive
Okay.
and that they could, they could follow up. So
Yeesh.
people were very appreciative. They were,
Yeah.
thank you so much for letting us know, but we said, like, there's no way to ever know where somebody got it from. Did they come with it? Did they leave with, like, you don't really know, but we just wanted to say, out of, concern for everyone's safety, that this is what, happened. And please, if you have any symptoms, please get tested and follow procedure.
Right.
And what town was that in, Jennifer?
In the DC area. Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So we're still kind of, we're still evaluating this, but that we didn't have, obviously last year we didn't have anything in person. So this is our toe in the water here. But so any questions? Happy to answer them, or you can ask me.
Yeah, Tom, where did you hold it? Where did you hold your in-person for September? Where will you be holding it in September for your recording? What hotel? Are you happy with who you're working with? Or what conference facility are you using?
So it's actually our own offices.
Okay.
They just did a rebuild of the office. So there are 4 conference rooms that are really high-end conference rooms, and we're just bringing in an AV group called Glass River Media, which does filming, and it's actually 3 of the conference rooms, they'll turn them into film studios. So far, we've had only a couple people express concerns about coming in. Of course, if they don't want to, they can just do it virtually. But yeah, so it's not a hotel. We didn't want to incur the costs that come with that. So, and they happen to have very good conference facilities in our office, which were much more affordable. Yeah.
And you're located where?
In Friendship Heights.
Oh, you're here in DC.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Mhm. Yeah. So thank you. Anyway, don't mean to dominate. Jennifer, please have others.
Sorry, I was just responding to one of the questions in the chat. Okay, so one question here. Hold on, I gotta back up. How are people communicating about their COVID precautions? Email, how early and often? That's one of the questions out there. We actually have it on our website too. We have a whole separate section that says safety, COVID and safety. Other folks wanna chime in on that piece, and then we'll get to the next question.
We do the
Andy?
same. We have it on our website, and we're basically saying that everybody knows what they should be doing by now, but what we're going to be doing is whatever is pertaining at the time. And this is part of the problem. We did our first event in June, and within about 3 minutes of opening, everybody had their masks off. They're all pretty much vaccinated anyway. It's in the travel industry. So there was no issue. But our next event is in November in Germany, in Berlin. And if anybody can tell me what their conditions are going to be by the time we get there, good on you. give me your crystal ball. So we will do what's necessary at the time, and if there are no restrictions in place, then we will act accordingly. It's up to you. If you don't want to come, if it's too risky for you, don't come.
Okay. Let's see. Question here about, in the hindsight, folks' overall experience with pricing, registration, sponsorships, how has that evolved over the last 18 months? And to go along with that, I want to bring in a question I got yesterday. Is anybody using text messaging to work or notify your attendees or give them marketing messages or COVID messages or anything? And if so, if you have a good text messaging platform, if you could share that in the chat, that would be another. Anyone want to chime in on the last 18 months? Anything you've changed sponsorship wise or registration? I think someone commented earlier, I think it was Stephanie, that registrations were coming along pretty well. We're finding the same. They're not where they were 2 years ago, but they're about 2/3, between half and 2/3 of the people that might have come live 2 years ago, we're seeing come live this year. And our sponsorship and exhibits have been fine. They're the first ones that want to come back. It's their livelihood. So it's the end users that are the ones that are, in some cases, not able to travel or not sure yet what they're doing. But anyone else on that question?
Are you talking, sorry, I was answering a question. This is the general question about pricing, registration, and all that. Well, one thing I would say is that also all through COVID, when we did our meetings, again, when we did our membership meetings virtually, and I didn't charge anything, even though I had a small cost. I used Engages for that too, and it's very reasonable. But anyway, there was a small cost. I didn't charge anybody anything. I think going forward, when I do, I probably will start incorporating more virtual options, at least for some time, because it seems this will be with us for some time, and there will be people uncomfortable to travel. And I also found that it expands who can and will attend an event. Of course, the quality of participation is sometimes different, but I think I will charge going forward because it will reduce the number of people who just sign up just because they can and then not show up. And that really, I think, affects the quality for everybody. So that's one takeaway, is that unlike, a sponsored webinar, where we have found in my industry, you just can't really charge for webinars anymore because there's so many sponsored webinars. But this I view as different. If it's a multi-day, if it's a conference, if it's a membership meeting, other things, I will probably charge. Sponsorships, yeah, we charged a lot less for sponsorship in 2020 for our virtual event, a virtual conference. It's been really difficult. I still don't know that we're at a steady state. I think the vendors didn't really like the idea of the virtual conference, but last year they just had no choice, so they did it. This year is kind of weird because they have a choice. There have been some events, and so, like someone else said, the exhibit experience. The plus side is that it's so very trackable. The downside is that it's so very trackable, and people know that, and so they don't want to come in a booth if they know, boop, all of a sudden they're going to be tracked. And anyway, so I think it's while the virtual event now is much more of a known quantity, that was the problem last year, is explain to vendors what the experience would be. It was a huge education challenge. Now they know, but they're like, they would rather do live. So even though in some cases you're going to reach people virtually that wouldn't come to a live event. So there's a little bit of a difference there. And of course, the value is not only in who's at the event itself, but all of the promotion that you get around it. So I don't know if that really, I babbled for a little bit, but those are some of our experiences.
Yeah, I would echo everything Stephanie just said. We've found the same thing. For registration fees, where we've landed is for our 2 September events, it'll be hybrid. They're both 2-day events for different audiences. The in-person fee is $24.95, although we've definitely have to discount off of that. So I'd say it's averaging more around $19.95. And then the virtual registration is $6.95. And it excludes obviously the networking activities and then excludes the roundtables. So it's a pared down version of the in-person event. And on the sponsorship side, our virtual sponsorships have been about 50% the fee of our in-person. We don't have exhibits at our events. So all of our sponsors really are coming for a thought leadership opportunity, which translates into a roundtable. In most cases, hosting a roundtable as part of the event.
What industry are you in, Jamie?
So Chief Executive Group is the company. We hold events for CEOs, board members, and CFOs.
Yeah.
So all of our sponsors are, more service providers versus product companies.
And you do roundtables and they moderate the roundtable, the sponsor? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's a mix. They'll either someone from our editorial team will serve as the host and they're as the subject matter resource. Or in some cases, yes, the sponsor themselves will facilitate the roundtable. And that, for the in-person, really, from a sponsorship standpoint, is the only thing we've been able to demonstrate solid ROI on, just because our audience they're not the exhibitor audience. So we've tried the online exhibit booths, and to Stephanie's point, the benefit is you can track that, and the downside is that you can track that. So we just can't show the traffic to those pages that someone, a true exhibitor type sponsor is looking for.
Is anyone else doing that? I'm in the process of doing that with a couple of clients right now, building these C-suite roundtables, but we're doing them virtually right now. And we're because a lot of government is not back in the office yet, and so they're not traveling. And so if anyone's having any luck with that, please hit me up in the chat. I'd love to talk with you about it. What you're doing, what's working. We're finding it there. We have to have a large reg list to make a small, to ensure a decent number of people on the Zoom call, on the Zoom meeting.
We have about a 60% conversion on the roundtables. So you definitely, if you're, 50 to 60. So if you're promising 10, you need 18 to 20 say yes.
Mm-hmm.
I do think with virtual, you can actually, and we've, I don't know if a sponsor would agree to this on the front end, but they do after the fact. You can have a smaller peer group online be successful. So whereas in person, you might, have the 10 to 12, you could have a 7 to 8 person roundtable in that format, be pretty interactive and robust. And we found, our sponsors been okay with that.
Stacey, did you want to share some of the feedback you had on the offering the enterprise for virtual? I think there were a couple of questions on that in the chat. And if you're talking, you're on mute.
Who did you ask?
Stacy Bailey.
Stacy Bailey.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
she was the one that mentioned she might have stepped away. Let's see, hold on. I think there was another, Tom asked about Hubelo. Am I saying that right, Tom?
Hubelo. I think it's Hubelo. Has anyone
Hubelo?
heard of that? No. It's I've gotten a quick demo on it. Looks interesting. It's a competitor to Hopin, not as well funded. Hopin's gotten some astronomical VC funding. But if no one's heard about it, then we can move on.
Hey, sorry, can you hear me now, Jen?
Yes, I can. Yep.
Hey,
Perfect.
sorry about that. I'm at a doctor's appointment.
Oh gosh, no worries.
So I was trying to participate during via chat, but yeah, no, so we have a membership base that mostly attends this meeting. So we're probably about 65% unpaid because it's already baked into their membership cost. But for non-members, yeah, we did enterprise passes, which really increased our reach. So like year over year, we didn't do it for 2020 conference. And I think we had about 600 attendees. And for our smaller 2021 conference, we had 900 attendees. We typically have about 150 live. So really just really increased our reach within the utility companies, which helped us tremendously just on our overall engagement.
And when you say enterprise pass, do you mean just like a company pass where multiple people can attend?
Yep, we opened it up to, this is your code, and you can share it around. And we had like 40, 50 people from one utility, from single utility companies. So which we usually have like 2 that can attend a live conference. So I think we'll probably proceed with some sort of, in the future, some sort of, virtual option, just to continue taking advantage of that. Right now we're struggling with the live event that's in 2 months. So we're, I don't know, it would almost be easier to be virtual, I think, at this point.
We did a similar thing to Stacy. So for our membership group, it's called the Innovation Council, and we had tied it to a strategy and tech conference that ended up being virtual the last 2 years. And so instead of, and part of the membership was that you get 1 live attendee as part of your fee, but instead we changed that to a 10-member enterprise pass, to use Stacy's term. And that worked out really well because we did in many cases have 10 people attend. And these were people just like Stacy, who these are the strategy and tech people in the company that the vendors really want to reach, but so many of them don't typically have the budget to travel to conferences. They're not necessarily senior executives, and they're like down in the organization that you don't even know who they are in many cases. And so that was real value for the vendors to be able to reach those people. Now, really, what does reach mean? We could probably refine that, but it was good. It got people out of the woodwork that we didn't know and that nobody else knew as well. So.
Okay, a couple folks have mentioned in the chat about just having presenters provide their, or in some cases, record their presentation ahead of time. And then if they can't call in, then it could still be used. And Andy, you said that's worked pretty well to add more quality to the program. Do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, it's worked really, really well. And we've had some really good two-way conversations virtually in the Q&A as well, which has added, benefit. But maybe it's industry specific to us, but a lot of our speakers seem to come in with revisions the night before and even the morning of the conference. Having them pre-record it, they really have to think it through and also they watch themselves, which makes them realize what an abominable job some of them do. So, you know, they've really stepped it up, which has been great. I mean, it's the one benefit I can think of at the moment of virtual, because we really don't have any interest from our attendees, and certainly not from our exhibitors, in any virtual events, and that's dropping away very quickly. So we're changing our strategy completely now to do very much more focused workshops and working groups rather than general webinars.
Great. Other questions or topics folks want to talk about that we haven't covered yet so far? How are people hearing from sponsors and clients? Are you able to save sales if you're not having your event live? Are you able to transition it easily to virtual? Or if you have a media product, or folks looking at that or at your website or other ways to drive or to change up the revenue stream? Anybody having success with that they want to share? Or perhaps even new product development that you had for your events? Anything new you added? We've talked a little bit about the networking, but anything else? I think, Tish, you mentioned gamification worked for one of yours.
Yeah, so we use Engages for our virtual events as well, and they have a leaderboard competition thing, and we got sponsors to donate prizes, and basically it's a live feed, so it shows you who's ahead, and based on whether they've asked a question, if they've engaged with a booth or a sponsor, if they've posted a comment somewhere, there's all different things you get points for, and it shows who's winning in real time. So, I mean, it's kind of interesting, and the sponsors were great about providing some really great prizes. So, you know, it at least showed some engagement.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that.
We used that too, and it was nifty. Where we were disappointed with it was that the people who won, we had like a first, second, third place winner, and they were all like salespeople and not so we gave points for doing things other than visiting booths, but you did get points for visiting booths, of course. And, basically what you had was competitors visiting each other's booths, or just salespeople who were not the kind of people that they're not the potential buyers. So it was fun, but it didn't necessarily encourage the behavior we wanted. It wasn't negative. It just wasn't the positive we had hoped it would be.
We monitored that and took them off. If they were a sponsor or somebody like that, we just pulled them, because, and they know that we want our attendees, our distributors, to be the ones winning that. So it wasn't really.
We pulled some, but we probably should have pulled more, or
Totally.
Yeah.
Has anyone had to change up their speaker approval forms, or sometimes certain events you require the speakers to say it's okay for us to share their presentation after the fact, or in some cases we want to let them know we're going to have it on demand for folks that can view it after the fact, who've paid for it. Anybody have to change up their speaker authorization forms, or have you had anyone say, no, I don't grant access? And how did you mitigate that with folks? Does that anyone come across that?
We haven't come across it, but I wondered about it. We have not historically been super buttoned up about those speaker agreements, because it's just never been an issue. In our industry, like, the farther and wider the speeches go, people would be happy, but nonetheless, I recognize that may not always be the case.
Okay. About 10 minutes left. Any other last minute burning issues folks have. I don't know if we covered enough on the whole COVID, vaccine, non-vaccine, mask, no mask, what city are you in, where are you going? But I mean, I do think it's changing and evolving almost every 24 hours, it seems like. So whatever we decide today at 11:49 a.m. Eastern time doesn't necessarily mean a week from now it's going to be the same, which is, I think, a challenge for all of us, kind of not being able, in Andy's terms, to have that crystal ball. But if anyone has any other questions about that didn't get answered, can certainly talk about it now.
I do actually, if I could ask something which is about costs. And I think this may apply to you, Jennifer, but certainly some of the other people who spoke today. I feel like if we're going to do this hybrid piece, we're going to add on the COVID costs and the management, although I did want to thank Jamie for mentioning sharemi.health/events as a site. It sounds like a platform where you can kind of push off some of the tracking of your attendees to get it, to have verification. But there seem to be so many costs involved in this. When you're speaking with a client who's like they don't want to be spending that kind of money, moving into hybrid, and the rest of this, how do you, how many people here are finding that just funding these hybrid experiences, because you don't want to lose the online audience, is becoming an issue? Or are you simply, like Jennifer mentioned earlier for your, I think, July conference, that you were like, no, there was no virtual component. We just did the on-site for 375 and that was that. Has anyone felt that it's cost effective or is it just overwhelming to your team to develop enough sponsorship of both pieces to make it worth your while?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have economies of scale at our organization. So we are able to do the virtual component, and we kind of see it as just almost like if you have a print product and you have an online version of the print product, we look at events the same way. It's platform agnostic in some cases. If we have a sponsor that can't travel, they have a travel restriction, then they get to sponsor the virtual, right? So they still get a benefit. It's just not in person. But we're able to do that because of how many events we have, and we've been able to get cost. But yeah, it is an additional cost. I mean, obviously the virtual platforms cost money separately in and of from whatever the live event is. And I think where you really double the cost is if you're trying to offer a live stream at the same time, because then your AV goes up, by a few $1,000s up to maybe 10 or 15,000, depending on how many rooms you need it in and how often you need to have it. But
Absolutely.
yeah, other people have
so for our September event, one of our September events that we will be live streaming. So we're only live streaming sessions in the general session room, so not breakouts. It's a 2-day event. The additional costs from an AV perspective for us to do that is roughly $6,000. So for us, we need to sell enough of, those $700 registrations to at least cover the cost of that to make it worth doing.
You mean 6,000 just for the live stream, just for the live stream shooter and his AV?
So setup? That's for everything required, like the switcher that's required, the labor, and for the videographer,
Are you using a hotel setup, or are you bringing an outside AV?
We use an outside AV firm.
Is that a multi-day situation?
It's a 2-day event. Yeah.
2 days.
So that's across 2 days. So yeah.
And is it
6,000 across the 2 days?
Yeah.
Just for one room?
Main room?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, I think ours was 10 for 3 days. So that's probably about the same.
Yeah, that seems at one camera or more than one camera?
Just one camera. Yeah. And that includes the production of the virtual event
on the back end
as well. Yeah.
Editing.
He does the lower thirds and all of the speaker breakout rooms in the back end and everything.
Did you find that it opened it up like a Pandora's box of all sorts of possible tech issues that could go wrong? I mean, I think that's one of the challenges, right? Is that once you start getting into live streaming, option.
Yeah, so this will be our first time doing it. So ask me next month what came out of Pandora's
Yeah.
box.
We did, so we added the live stream again for the general sessions of our meeting last week. But what's really tricky is that at our meetings, there's also really like a discussion component even to those general sessions quite often, if only a Q&A. And so we only had about 40 people in the room. So we had 7 tables, pods of 6 or so people. And part of what we paid for, there was a mic on each table. There was a guy in the back with the mixing board. And to follow who had a question and, and still let it unfold organically, it was a little bit of a challenge. And turning all the mics off and then only turning on the one of the person who's speaking, but doing it in time before they finish their question. And that was something.
Yeah, that's going into these first hybrid events. That's exactly why we're only doing the general sessions and not the breakouts, because the breakouts are so much more interactive for
right.
Capture all of that part.
Yeah, well, this wasn't even our breakout. This was the general session, but
yeah,
after
with
at the end. So there might be a speaker and then there would be some Q&A after.
Right.
Yeah, that was challenging. I think we're going to still try to master that a little bit better. And I think maybe what I didn't want to do, which would have been a better sound quality, would be to pass the mic. And for a variety of reasons, we didn't want to pass the mic. 1, for COVID, and 2, because it's just so not spontaneous. But we might try that next time and just have staff passing the mic and wiping it down each time and saying, wait, hold your comment, wait till I get over there. And you can do, if you don't have 500 people in the room, you can do that. You can get around pretty quickly. But
we had a couple flurry of questions just come in the last few minutes here. Nancy, you had a question about refunds and cancellation. What specific question on that?
Yes, and I'll try to be brief. So we're doing a big show in a month from now, and it's a trade show with the exhibition, the concurrent sessions, the works. And I'm curious to find out from the group how people have handled last minute cancellations. People just get nervous about attending in person. As far as our requirements for COVID, we are not requiring vaccine proof. And right now, Kansas City has a mask mandate, but August 28th, they're going to provide an update on that. The Attorney General for the state of Missouri, which is where the convention center is suing the mayor of Kansas City for the mask mandate. So we're not sure if they will continue the mask mandate to cover, a month from now when our show is. So it remains to be seen if there will or will not be a local mask mandate in place. It would certainly be convenient for us if there was, because then we wouldn't have to be the ones to try to decide how we want to enforce that for the show. But, with all these unknowns, obviously, depending on what happens, I was just curious how hard and fast, people kept to their cancellation policies, because we're way past, our cutoff date where we would refund people their money. We are offering an on-demand program, but it's only $195. People have spent well over $1,000 for their registration to the in-person. So I was just curious what people are doing on those kinds of situations.
Anyone want to chime in?
I can, if you like. I mean, we found and we are finding that our exhibitors are holding on to every last cent they possibly can. So if we can get a 20% deposit off them, that's about as good as we're going to get. and a lot of them are holding back their final confirmations until 30 days out. So, you know, I honestly don't think we'll be cancelling any events in the near future unless they are cancelled by the local authority or national authority. But we've basically said to everybody that up to 30 days out, we will refund if we can. If not, we will hold it until the next event. As for delegates, much the same. It's just a miserable situation. I sympathize with you. And I'm sorry if I laughed when you were talking about governors suing mayors and things, but that's exactly the sort of rubbish that we're all having to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Makes it almost impossible, frankly, for anything like straightforward planning.
Yeah, we've offered to the same thing, to push them to either another event that's happening in this year or the on-demand version, or in some cases, letting them transfer their funds to the following year. And then I think someone also asked about force majeure. We did invoke that last year successfully, but not, I mean, obviously we haven't asked for it this year. So I don't know if anyone has asked for it this year. And then I think someone was also curious what folks are looking at for 2022. Has anybody I think someone was maybe having trouble deciding if in 2022 they might need to cancel, what that might look like.
I was more interested in cancellation policies. If anyone has explored what those might look like, given that they will almost certainly exclude COVID from, has anyone possibly looked into that?
I looked into it last year. I concluded that it's a big waste of money because the likelihood that you could meet the requirements are nil to none. And yes, they exclude COVID or any derivative.
They exclude COVID?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like a pre-existing condition.
It sure is.
Yeah. Well, I see
Worldwide
we're at time,
pre-existing
everybody. So I
condition.
just wanted to thank everyone for your time. And
Thanks for that reality check.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Sure. Good session. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Good rest
Appreciate
of your
it.
day.
Everybody.
Thanks.